So in the last video, we ran through what actually a loop is. This video, I will be showing you the simplest types of loop, which is the for loop. So like any other concept in programming, it always follows a routine or a framework. And in this case, it always starts with the word for. I here is just a variable name. It's a variable that we declare when we run the for loop. So it can be I, J, K, L, any value. It can be monkey or donkey. This can be any variable name. Next, this section on in range just tells the compiler that I'm going to define two numbers that will allow you to determine how many times the loop should run. 0 and 3 are the specific number of times that the loop runs. So whenever you see two values inside a range, you just need to take the second number minus the first number. So in this case, 3 minus 0, that is the number of times that the loop will run. So if the loop is running 3 times, I will be taking different values every time it is run. The first time, it will take the value of 0, and 0 comes from the left hand side of the range, and slowly increase up to the value 3. So it will take the value of 0, followed by 1, followed by 2. Finally, in each run of the loop, it will be printing out the loop has run whatever value is stored inside I times. So here we can actually visualize what is the value of I every time that this loop runs. So let's take a look at what it looks like in Jupyter Notebook. So let's take a look at the code. For I in range 0 to 3, we print out how many times the loop has run, and this is the output. So as we can tell, the first time that the loop runs, I takes the value 0, followed by 1, and then 2. So if we change the values inside this range, so let's say for example 2 and 5, so when it was 0 and 3, we take 3 minus 0 to know that it runs 3 times. Same thing here. In this case, if it's 2 and 5, we take 5 minus 2 to know that it also runs 3 times. The very first time that the loop runs, I takes the value of the left hand side, which is the value 2. So we see that it takes the value 2, 3, and 4. Whenever it reaches 5, when it comes back here and it checks, it exits the loop. Therefore, this line doesn't run. This line doesn't run. So let's go back to our notes. And now that we understand how a loop is coded, here are some tips. So to find out number of times that the loop has run, take the second number minus the first number. So we have seen that already. I is just a variable. It can be X or Y. And we have also explained that. And this loop runs a fixed number of times. So by defining these two numbers, we have already specified it needs to run a fixed number of times. Okay, so let's look at what the code is doing behind the scene. For the first line, declares a variable called I, initializing it to 0, which is the number on the left. And within the first line, we have also indicated that the loop should stop once it reaches the value 3. Since I starts with the value 0, it is not 3, it goes into the print statement. I now increases by 1, and it goes back to the first line and checks again. Since I is still not 3, it goes to the print statement until I reaches 3 and the loop stops. So let's do another for loop, but this time instead of printing a string of text, we want to keep track of a Grab driver's earnings. So a Grab driver by the name of Paul earns $200 a day, and he wants to know how much he will earn in a week, assuming he works from Monday to Saturday. So from a layman's standpoint, this is what it would look like. We don't actually need a program to help us to calculate this. It is just 200 multiplied by 6. But I want to use this example to show you how a loop runs. So as we mentioned earlier, every day that he works from Monday to Saturday, he earns 200, and we keep track of his running total: 200, 400, 600, 800, 1000, and 1002. So visually, the loop runs this way. We start, check or initialize the total to be 0. This is what he has earned so far. So if he hasn't worked yet, he hasn't earned any money, therefore total is 0. When total is 0, I is also 0. So now we check, is I less than 6? If I is less than 6, then continue to add $200 to the total and add 1 to I. So that brings us, and we check whether I is still less than 6. This goes on 6 times until I becomes 6. Because I is no longer less than 6, the loop ends. So let's again look at the code, what the code is doing. So total equals to 0. We have defined this variable total. We do not need to explicitly define the variable I. By actually writing the second line for I in range 0, 6, it automatically defines a variable called I. We have also identified that it is going to run 6 times. So here, within the first line, we have also indicated that the loop should stop once it reaches the value 6. Since it is initialized to 0, we start by running this line. So total plus equals to 200. This is the in-place operator that we have learned in lesson 2. And I now increases by 1 going back to the first statement. Since I is not, there's a typo here, it should not be 3, it should be since I is not 6. We continue to add 200 to the total until I reaches 6 and the loop stops. So if we add on another column into the earlier table, we see that on Monday, when I is 0, there's actually $200 that he earns. On Tuesday, we have incremented the value of I by 1, and we have added another 200. So this continues all the way until I reaches 5. When the last time that we increment it to 6, it exits the loop because the condition for stopping is now met. And the condition for stopping was identified earlier when I reaches 6. So let's take a look at the code in Jupyter Notebook. So for total equals to 0, for I in range 0, 6, total plus equals 200, and we see that when we reach the total, when we print it out, it's 1002. You can try for yourself, you can change it to different values. Let's say it's 8, the loop will run 8 times, each time adding $200 to the total. The last kind of for loop that we will be learning about is a for loop that iterates through a list. So for example, in the previous chapter, I think in chapter 3, we have discussed about this concept called a list. So if you remember, square brackets refer to list, and x equals to a list containing the values 1, 2, and 3. So again, we use a for keyword, and I, instead of in range, we just put in x. So instead of indicating a range, the loop will just go through each value within x and print out the same thing here. So let's take a look inside the code. And the loop has run 1, 2, and 3 times. But here, do remember that it doesn't start always at 1. It just depends on what are the values inside x. If x has changed to 4, 5, 6, then we will put the loop has run 4 times, 5 times, and 6 times. So that brings us to the end of the exercise on for loops. I hope it's clear. We will continue the lesson with while loops in the next video.